Pop quiz, hot shot. What's the first thing you think about when you think about the Fast and the Furious movies? Is it Vin Diesel? Is it cars? Is it family? All of those things would be perfectly reasonable answers, but for me personally, the number one thing I think about is just how stupid the naming convention for the entire series is, and the fact that there really is no naming convention for the entire series. I mean, let's just think about how confusing this is. First, there's the Fast and the Furious. Makes sense. Then you move to Too Fast, Too Furious. Stupid title, but still makes sense. Then Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift feels like it's going to be like a side movie type of thing, but the series doesn't treat it that way. This is definitely number 3. Then we pull that classic move of losing the thes, right? So it's Fast and Furious now. Then we go to Fast 5, spelling out the number. Then we got Fast and Furious 6, but with the numeral Furious 7. And then my personal favorite, The Fate of the Furious. Then up until this coming weekend, the newest one was F9, completely different from anything else we've seen in the entire series. And then finally, the newest one is going to be called Fast X, because for whatever reason, Roman numerals are in now. It really makes no sense at all why you would go this far to have like no naming convention. The Fast and the Furious, but then you got movies that have Furious first, and then you got movies that have a 2 at the beginning of it. So if you're going alphabetical, this thing's all over the place. And then some of them, you've got numbers in it, so it is helpful, but half of the time you don't. And as much as I like to give this series a hard time about the naming of the series and the movies in it, it is not the only one that does it. There are a lot of series that do really, really confusing things when it comes to naming each individual movie. Sometimes you get movies that are trying to be just a little too cute with their titles, right? Like in the similar way that we got Fate of the Furious, right? For this one, the prime example has got to be Die Hard. You got Die Hard, and then Die Hard 2 is got a couple different names that it throws around, but definitely some of the posters call it Die Harder. And that's just the beginning of how clever this series thinks it is, right? It goes from Die Harder to Die Hard with a Vengeance to Live Free or Die Hard, and then finally wrapping it up with A Good Day to Die Hard. If you don't already know, how are you supposed to guess which one of these movies comes first if you're looking at just the posters on it? I mean, outside of the fact that you can tell by seeing the amount of interest in playing the part just draining out of Bruce Willis's face. Sometimes, though, these weird naming conventions come along later on in a series' existence, right? So, for example, on this one, I like to think about the Scream movies, right? I mean, for this one, you might say, hey, it makes perfect sense. You got Scream, then you got Scream 2, then 3, then 4, but then you got Scream 2022. And this is a really annoying thing when it comes to like remakes, reboots, these legacy sequels, right? Where it's like, well, we think people are too dumb, or maybe studies have shown that like if we just name it the first thing, people are more likely to come and see it, which is probably true, because as much as I like to give the studios a hard time for being dumb, us as an audience, we're dumb too. So then you name a movie Scream, even though really it's Scream 5, and then for the rest of that movie's existence, it's going to forever be known as Scream parentheses the year that it came out. And that's just a sad existence for any movie. But Scream's changing of the titles doesn't end there. When we get to Scream 6, we decide to start using Roman numerals. And again, this is just because the marketing people want to be so cute about how they're doing the naming, right? By putting the Roman numerals in there with the M. Does it really matter at all? No. Do I think it's annoying? Yes. And again, I just want to be really clear. I'm not saying that these movies are bad because, the titles are weird or misleading or confusing on them. I like most of these movies that we've talked about so far. And that's going to go double for the Jurassic Park series. I think that, especially the first one, is fantastic. Maybe one of my favorite movies ever made. But that whole series, the titles are just a mess. You got the first one, Jurassic Park. But then you got The Lost World, Jurassic Park, taking the main title and turning it into the subtitle for the second movie. Then we move into Jurassic Park 3. Now we're using Roman numerals. I get it. Once again, you want to be cute, you want to be clever, so you got the claw marks, and that's your 3. But then you got to remember that the Jurassic World series is in here too, so Jurassic Park 4 is really Jurassic World, which then has a sequel, which isn't called Jurassic World 2 or Jurassic Park 5. It's called Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and then you finish it up with Jurassic World Dominion. Again, even as somebody who really tries to remember these things, I can find myself accidentally saying the wrong title for these movies at sometimes. Another series that has this problem is going to be the Alien series. You start off with Alien, and then you get to Aliens. It makes sense. There's multiple aliens as opposed to just one like there was in the first movie. But then you get to Aliens 3, which really is like cubed. And then we just start throwing random words on the end of these titles with Alien Resurrection. And then we go to a prequel, Prometheus, which I wouldn't have even felt like throwing in here. But then the sequel to Prometheus is called Alien Covenant. But as confusing as the Alien series might be when it comes to trying to figure out what order we're going to watch those on just based on the title, I think that Rambo has one of the worst examples of how to take care of this. So we have the first Rambo movie. It's called First Blood. It's based off of a book. Obviously, you're going to name it the same title as the book. We're all good. Then we get Rambo, First Blood, Part 2. This one I have absolutely no problems with. It makes complete sense. But then we get to Rambo 3, which if we were going to actually try to make this one technically correct, it should be called Rambo 2 First Blood 3. So that's all kinds of confusing. But then the next one that came out like 20 years later is called just Rambo. So now we have two movies in this series called Rambo, one of them with a subtitle and one of them without, but the one without the subtitle is actually the sequel to the other one. Now at least Rambo sticks the landing because Rambo Last Blood is the last movie in the franchise and seems to be, going to be staying that way. So, I mean, we should give him at least a little bit of credit for that. Now, out of all of these series that I've listed, I do think that the Fast Saga is probably the worst at naming their sequels, but there is one franchise that, at least in my opinion, is miles worse than even the Fast Saga is. Like Fast and the Furious seems to be trying to catch up with how bad the series titling is on the Halloween series. Let's go ahead and start back at the beginning. We've got Halloween, then we've got Halloween 2, and then we've got Halloween 3. Season of the Witch, which makes sense. We're not talking about Michael Myers anymore. We really kind of want to move it towards the anthology things that we were planning at the beginning. And so it makes sense. Let's throw a subtitle on there. That's just fine. But then we go to Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. But now instead of using Roman numerals, we're just using regular numbers. We got no problems here with Halloween 5. We got The Revenge of Michael Myers, continuing that cycle that we saw with 4. But then we get into Halloween 6, where we just completely drop the number altogether, and it's just called Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. Now, if we're going to be honest from here and moving on forward in the Halloween series, the titles of these movies is the least confusing thing if you're trying to keep all of it straight, since they're like restarting the franchise with almost every other movie. And this is one of those restarts with the next Halloween movie, which is Halloween 7, but it's called Halloween H2O 20 years later, 20 years after the release of the original one. We're going back, Jamie Lee Curtis is back, and now we're going to pretend that a lot of that other stuff didn't happen. But then the next one, Halloween 8, is actually called Halloween Resurrection. That's a direct sequel to Halloween H2O. That one's got Busta Rhymes in it, so, it's not great. So they decide to reboot the series, and of course, in the lazy way that we go about doing things, we just call it the same name as the original by just saying it's Halloween. Now, this movie, though, now really gets referred to as Rob Zombie's Halloween, along with the sequel, Halloween 2, the same title as the original sequel. So at least these ones aren't just getting called like the year that they came out, which we can't say for the next movie that comes out in the series, which again is just called Halloween. That's right. For the third time in this series, we have a movie that's just called Halloween. This one, though, to differentiate it from the others, gets called 2018. This one pretended that all of the other movies, except for the first one, just didn't exist at all. So if you're trying to watch these movies, forgetting all of those and just watching it in continuity, you would watch Halloween and then you'd watch Halloween. So again, try to explain to me why that makes any sense. Outside of marketing, I understand that's why they're doing this. Then we just go to like throwing random words on the end of these sequels with Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. I think that the Fast and Furious series is going to have to do a little work to try to catch up with the Halloween series, but I don't think that it's out of the question that it might be able to get there, considering that we just learned that Fast X is the first in a trilogy that is going to end the series, which, who knows, means we could have a movie that was titled Fast X Part 3 Retribution or something like that by the time this thing is all said and done. So Did I miss anything? I know that especially with horror movies, there are a lot of really weird, confusing titles out there. Let me know your favorite in the comments below, and subscribe if you like this video, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.